Hey everybody, it's Gil here with the Sailing Vessel Dream Chaser, and in last week's episode, we lost our epic battle with that damn mattress. If you didn't see that video, I'll put a link right up here. It was kind of comical. It just kind of shows you some of the nonsense that happens sometimes when you live aboard a boat. This week, we're going to show you how to do some maintenance on your dinghy. I'm going to show specifically how to adjust the steering if your actual steering wheel on a steering dinghy is tight, show you how to go about troubleshooting, diagnosing, and correcting that, maybe without buying new parts. And also, we're going to show you how we got our dinghy sparkling clean after a year of some neglect. Probably not the thing you want to do to the dinghy all the time if general maintenance and cleaning, but you will see a magical difference in this, and I'll show you the tips and tricks that we use to do that. If you haven't done so yet, and by the end of this video we've earned a subscription or a like, we'd certainly appreciate it if you went ahead and did that as well. Let's get to the video.
As we prep for our move to Florida, that means Whitney's going to be moving back onto Last Affair, our 43-foot Gulf Star. There's just a couple of things that needed a little bit of tuning and maintenance on it. The hatch was starting to get really loose. One of the hinges had sort of busted out where the screws were. It was stainless screws through an aluminum backing, and they sort of welded together loosely, and it just wasn't working. So the cat was able to push that thing and knock the hatch off and ultimately escape on the boat. So went ahead and put that together today, added a little latch so it can be latched from inside or outside, just so Whitney feels secure when we're not here. And yeah, getting a little bit more stuff done on this boat. Kind of show what it looks like, the older hatches, but I didn't want to take a ton of time on these.
So these lift-up hinges that are right here were just kind of coming loose. I actually bought new ones. They were $70 for the new hinges, were stainless, and when I got them back home I was like, you know, I might be able to reuse these old ones. So with a little hacksaw I was able to hacksaw out the old screws, and then instead of just putting these as screws this time, I went ahead and drilled them all the way through, epoxy filled the inside of the wood, and then bolted them all the way through with a nut on the inside, just a simple 10 by 24 set of threads, and did the same thing on that bottom hinge there as well. You can see one side of the Lexan is all crazed, but hey, this works and it works well. You take this and just, these are bifold doors, just fold them open and then ultimately close them right back up. Yeah, latch them either from the outside, when she leaves she can lock it if she wants, and then on the inside I just put a small catch right here so she can lift that up, and that will catch on the inside of the hatch. You know, it's really more security for the cats than if somebody wanted to get into this boat. Quite frankly, just about any boat, they could probably break through it, you know what I mean?
You may have recalled from an earlier video, we had a problem where the coach house roof met the sides of the coach house, and I took a cheap and easy way out. I tried to fix it with 5200 rather than actually glass it. I realized it needed glass. I called the boatyard. They came out. They basically planed the edge of this down just below the roof line so that they could run layers of glass up and actually adhere it to the actual roof itself. That work was done this week, and the next step is they'll come back and sort of sand and clean it. But let me show you what it looks like with just a rough glass for the length of the coach house now. I had another quick work trip, and as I took off out of the airport in New Orleans, it was really kind of cool to go over Lake Pontchartrain and see the bridge and whatnot in the distance. A couple of seconds later, I noticed we made almost a complete 180-degree turn, and we were flying east along the southern edge of Lake Pontchartrain. So you could see the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico, so I figured I'd take you along for that little ride.
Happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy teenage birthday, Chastity. I love you, I hope you have a great day. See ya. Sorry I can't be there today.
Well, that was a quick just overnight trip over to Miami to see a customer, and I now went ahead and flew back and was landing in Tampa St. Pete as part of my layover. It was kind of cool. As we were looking at homes in this area, we flew right over the Apollo Beach area where we looked at homes. You can get a good overhead view of the entire area. You know, we take for granted nowadays Google Maps and just how easy it is to scan the skyline and see what the maps look like from above, and satellite views, and zoom right in. But you know, the old days, I guess you had to hop up in an airplane or a helicopter and go take a look at what that topology looks like. So it was pretty cool. And as we flew in, kind of flew over this little airstrip, and you know, it was a good trip. So while I was out of town, Stephen from the boatyard came back again, and he continued to do some preparation on the surfaces here, sanding all of the rough fiberglass that they had just put down. So it was nice to kind of have that done, because it was a pretty jagged edge along the edge of the glass where it went up underneath that lip. So he prepped that surface and sanded it. This was on a Friday, and then told me he'd be back to go ahead and put the fairing on it and at least the first coat of primer. I've mentioned this before. The boatyard loves to do a coat of primer on it, and then they come back and they fair it again and sort of finish fairing it. The primer lets them see, with the difference in color, where those low spots are, and it makes it very easy to ultimately fair it out and sand it smooth.
What you doing? You cleaning the boat?
I'm scrubbing the deck.
While the girls were busy scrubbing down Last to Fair, I was really just relaxing. It was a beautiful day. All our boat neighbors were sitting out in a little green area and tables and chairs, and we just hung out and had a couple of drinks and just, telling a story. It was a great time. While we did that, Deb and Lee and Claire decided to take a little dinghy ride, and they went running around up and down the river around Brady Island and ran into a seaplane. Decided to go ahead and race a seaplane down the river. It was kind of neat.
Yeah, the question is, which way is he going to go? He's got to be going this way. It's turning. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I need to do a little bit of work on the dinghy. It's not been running well. It hasn't been idling well at all. And our friend told us about a guy that does some work on the dinghies. We're going to take the dinghy over to him. But quite frankly, if you remember in a video a couple of weeks ago, we were out of town and the back end of it, I guess it was over Christmas actually, the back end of it had sunk down just from rainwater. The bilge pump had turned off, and unfortunately the water got up over the battery, killed the battery in it, and I got to check the rest of the wiring in it. But because of that, I need to make sure everything's ready to go before I take it over to him. I was thinking about maybe changing the steering cable and maybe the throttle cable, but I'm going to take a look and see. The steering was getting really tight, and I suspect I know what's going on with that. So let me show you the best way to go about troubleshooting that on an outboard. So on a boat that has a steering wheel with an outboard, like we actually have on this dinghy, we were running into it with just being really tight, and in close quarters it was a little hard to turn the wheel.
The easiest way to check this, and forgive me, I didn't record all of this already, but as you know, there's a steering cable that comes from the steering console itself down through the out of the boat and then across through the back of the engine mount. I'll show you that in a close-up in a minute. And then there's a pin that connects up to that. So as you turn the wheel, it essentially pulls the motor back and forth. The easiest thing to do is disconnect. Let me move out of the way. If you disconnect the rod arm that's connected to the actual outboard, not to the mount, if you disconnect that from the steering rod, which you see is out right here already, you then want to see, does the motor turn easily? And if it does, then we don't think the problem is in the bearings here, which in our case, that's not the case, right? This turns really easily, you know, one finger motion without an issue. All right, so as we come up here, this is actually the steering rod cable. This normally goes all the way in here, and then this nut is what would be screwed right into the housing. And then on the other end of the engine mount, you would have the piece come out of this end of this tube, and then ultimately this bolts right onto that particular portion, and then as it pulls in and out, this is what steers the boat. So I disconnected this, put the nut on it so I didn't lose it, and started tapping this in with a rubber mallet. This is very hard to get through here. Once you get it flush with this, then you need something else to push through. I used a long socket extension. It was just fit in there perfectly, and continue to tap it until such time it comes out the other side. So let me show you how we get this out the rest of the way. So if you'll watch this piece right here, I'm going to go ahead and tap that piece out. And again, I'm using a socket to do that. And once it's very close, you should be able to pull this out of here. And this ends up being your steering cable. What we want to do is we want to just see how well this turns in and out without it connected to the motor. And this is actually turning really easy. So what it tells me is my problem is not in the cable and it's not in the bearings of the motor. What it actually is in the lift tube itself. This tube where we pulled this out. The reason I was having to pound that out is because it's gunked up in here, and chances are it's old hardened grease. So we're going to go ahead and see if we can get that cleaned out of there.
What we have to do with the dragon's over there, but what we have to do, if you put your fingers in the way, I'll get real upset, and I have to start all over. So don't do it.
Where'd you ever hear that before?
You just said it.
So I just went and bought a cheap set of these little wire brushes from Harbor Freight, and you can see they all have rings on the top. So I started with just taking one in a pair of wire cutters and cutting the end of it off, and I'm going to use this to kind of clean inside of this tube. So I've been spraying some WD-40, and in my case I'm actually using a brake cleaner, but whatever, I can use kerosene diesel, it doesn't matter. But the idea is to start clearing up what's in the tube. A little torch would be great to heat this up a little bit as well, just to soften some of that old grease, because the grease dirt is right here and it greases this inner pin where this thing hinges. And if you think about what's happening, this has to slide freely inside of that particular housing, and it just is not doing it freely. So, and it's good to make sure you clean this up as well, which I've already. Go ahead and get a little bit more brake cleaner and just spray it in there real good. All right, well, same thing here. These fiberglass rods that I use, they screw together for a running cable through like the bilge or whatever. The nice thing is they will work well to push this rag through there as well. So I'm gonna, again, spray a bunch of cleaner in here. There we go. So now that it's hanging out the other side, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna soak this with the cleaner all along here. The idea is to really let this thing do its job as it I'm just pulling this back and forth with that cleaner on it. Clean that tube. See if that helps it a little bit. Certainly got a lot of the grease out of it. Let's see if it's softened up enough of it. I'm now going to just put this rod right in here and we'll see if we can get it to push all the way in. So you might have to tap it in a little bit. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the wheel here. Now that I have it in, I'm going to pull this way. And then I'm just going to give it a little bit of a tap. Put this nut all the way at the end. And again, I'm doing this really light. Don't want to do it too hard. We're just kind of pushing that through there. And then it's just a matter of hand doing this nut. I want to make sure we don't strip this. Alright, got that twisted on there.
So we're just gonna pop that in there, put my washer on, my nut started. A little easier. All right, with the steering cable back in, it's now time to put the battery in this thing, and let's see if this little girl will turn over after being down a little underwater.
It just started raining. McKinley and I are in the storage shed, but we were going to wash the dinghy, so we stuck buckets under the gutters, and we're collecting some water. So as soon as it passes by, we can wash it again real quick. Don't spill it on yourself. There you go.
I can catch the water.
That's good for catching the water.
We had a little impromptu shower there. You saw McKinley putting the buckets. We put 2 of them underneath the gutter spouts here at the storage shed and just were able to wash the dinghy. It was a nice way to cool off, and frankly, that needed to be done anyway. So that was cool.
We hope you enjoyed this week's video, and if that steering cable video, how to troubleshoot, repair, and correct that tight steering, or even the how to clean the Hypalon Dinghy section of the video using a degreaser and melamine sponge, if that's helpful and you think it earned a subscription to this channel, we'd certainly appreciate it if you click that subscribe button and hit the little bell notification icon. That will let you know anytime we post new videos. Thanks for watching. And to that point, we post videos every single Friday at 5 p.m. Central Time. Next week's video, we'll start doing some more work on this coach house. We'll do some repairs on the inside, show you how we built up layers with marine grade plywood, sanded, faired, and repaired that all with epoxy as we prep that for putting in the new port. Thanks everybody. From Gil, Deb, and the Grand Squids aboard the sailing vessel Dream Chaser, safe sailing.